Hey guys, Zen here, and today I want to talk about the state of Rainbow Six Siege. It's been about a year since we've done one of these videos, but in that time, so much has changed about the game, and it's honestly one of the most interesting times to be playing Rainbow Six Siege. So in this video, we're going over everything: the meta, the operators, and even year 5, and what to look forward to in the future. So if you guys are new, make sure you subscribe, and with that, let's get into it. Now, I know it seems like forever, but at the very start of year 4 with Burnt Horizon, one of the most dramatic changes that's ever happened in Rainbow Six Siege, honestly, took place, and that was the removal of the ACOG on Ash's R4C. Now, I know on the surface that might not seem to be such a big change, but at the time, Ash was the most prominent attacker in the game. There weren't many rounds at all that went by without seeing an Ash, and it got to the point where the devs just had to do something, and so they made this change. Now, at this time, I know that there are quite a few of you out there that main the G36C when you choose this operator. It's actually become somewhat of a popular option in the meta, but back before year 4 season 1, the R4C was chosen 99% of the time, and that's officially, which means the G36C was never played in any sort of competitive nature. So what's been the effect? Well, the first and I think more important thing is that the policies around the ACOG have changed. No longer do attackers just automatically launch with the ACOG scope. We saw that with Nock, even though her ability doesn't really tie in with it and it would probably be a little bit overpowered. She was an attacker and she didn't launch with an ACOG scope, which is something that we haven't seen in a very long time. Also, the rule on defense has kind of changed as well. With the introduction of Goyo, we have now seen a 2-speed, 2-armor operator, basically an operator that isn't a 3-armor operator, with access to the ACOG scope. And the second result is that, of course, Ash has fallen from grace and she is no longer the top operator on attack. That spot has been replaced by Twitch, and even to this day, it's been a little bit controversial as to whether or not her F2, another very strong weapon on attack, should also lose its ACOG. It was really something that both proved that the ACOG was more than just a simple optic in the game, but also what operator balance looks like with and without it moving forward. I am curious though. First off, do you think Twitch should lose her ACOG on the F2? It's been rumored that there's some kind of nerf coming to it, and I think a lot of people are looking for that change in particular. But also, I'm wondering how you guys feel about the policies built around it. Do you think that attackers should always launch with an ACOG? It's kind of their advantage over the defenders. And of course, what are your thoughts about it on the defensive side? Let us know in a comment below. But now I want to transition over to the operators because, well, we did it. We reached the midway point of 50 plus operators in Rainbow Six Siege here in year 4. It's actually a massive milestone, and the reason I wanted to talk about it here with the current state is because it hasn't been so simple getting here, and now that we are here, all of the bases have essentially been covered. From traps to intel, there are multiple operators and even 2.0 kinds of operators that have been introduced into the game to get us to this 50 operator point. Now, why this is important is because looking forward in the future, the creativity and what's going to be coming out of new operators is going to have to be through the roof to really introduce something that isn't game breaking, but also makes sense in the scope of the game. If we look at one of the newest operators being introduced with Wamai, he completely changes the interactions between the defenders and grenades, the projectiles that the attackers throw. Jaeger just deletes it. He simply takes out what was thrown and just eliminates the projectile, where Wamai reinterprets it and uses it in a completely different way, and it adds layers of gameplay. We have discussed this in the past, and it's something that was very important for the devs to get right before they released this operator. The point is that now that all of these operators are here, and again, all the bases have been covered, sometimes twice over, what's next? We have seen some overlap here in year 4 with an operator like Nock in particular. She borrows heavily from both Caveira and Vigil to make her unique ability, the Hell Gadget, and there was always that portion of the community that was a little disappointed that there wasn't much actually new about her. This will of course bring us to the ongoing discussion of reused weapons in Rainbow Six Siege. All throughout year 4, most of the operators that have been released have come with weapons that have been previously available on other operators first. Now, from a balance perspective, this makes perfect sense. You don't always want to account for brand new weapons because every time you introduce even just one new weapon into the game, it completely changes the meta and forces you to kind of look at every other weapon and tweak and adjust accordingly. If you have a weapon that's already performing in the meta, or maybe maybe you want to give a little bit more attention to a weapon that isn't doing so hot, then it can be made available on a new operator and hopefully breathe life into something that maybe wasn't being used all that much. So it is somewhat of a double-edged sword. On one side, the community has become accustomed to this, brand new weapons being released alongside new operators, and that expectation was set by Ubisoft and really should be upheld throughout the entirety of the game. On the other side, there's already a mound of content with dozens of weapons available in the game, and so I suppose you could get to a point where there's just too many weapons, too many variables to account for, and balancing everything together and also making each new weapon feel unique and give it its own personality is probably impossible at a certain point. So I understand that perspective as well. For me personally, I think reusing weapons from a balancing standpoint makes sense. And again, I do understand that mound of content that is Rainbow Six Siege, but considering we have had a majority year of reused weapons and also gadgets to some degree, I would say moving forward, at least in the short term with year 5, a majority year of new content would counterbalance this previous one and would be a welcome change. So as far as the operators are concerned, now that we've reached that halfway mark and there's still 50 or so to go, I think from a gadgets and weapon standpoint, yes, the creativity and some of the newer releases will have to be exciting to keep the population healthy and to keep people excited about what's coming for Rainbow Six Siege. But I won't lie, some of the more recent gadgets have been pretty awesome. If you look at Wamai and his magnet system, the way it works is kind of sci-fi and it has this futuristic element to it. And then of course there's Amaru with the grappling hook. It's just super satisfying to use and feels great when it works and everything comes together perfectly, even if she isn't performing super well in the meta. Now, the last thing to mention about the operators is of course balance, and honestly I don't think we've had a more balanced meta than what we have in its current state here in year 4. We don't have any real outliers like we have in years past. In year 3, it was Lion. He had literal wall hacks and was the most overpowered operator in the game and really wasn't changed until very recently. In year 2, there was of course Ella. She was the most menacing roamer there was ever on defense, and because of this she took a substantial nerf and has really continued to be nerfed up until this point, with her most recent nerf of her shotgun. Now year 4 did see a couple of pretty strong operators, but I would say more so than strong operators, year 4 saw a lot of weak operators. Of course, there's been the tragedy that is Glaz. He was once one of the strongest operators on attack, but has since landed off of the charts when it comes to his pick rate and win rate data because his gadget and how it works has been altered and nerfed and changed and reworked so much that he's just become redundant in the meta. With Operation Phantom Sight, we got Warden, and Warden has struggled to stay relevant for a very long time. His most recent change made him a 2-speed 2-armor operator, and it definitely has made him a little bit more comfortable to use, but in general, Warden is still one of the weakest operators in the game and is really desperate for a substantial buff. Now, something we've actually never seen done before and that Ubisoft have announced may be happening very soon is a complete loadout change to an operator. For those of you guys that don't know, the community has been really concerned about Nonk recently and her performance because she just hasn't been stacking up too well, and so Ubisoft made the announcement that they have been looking at alternate loadouts for her and they might introduce that very soon. It's a big deal and could change how operators are tested and released in the future, so I thought it was important to bring up here. Next up, I want to talk about the monetization of Siege, and this is important because we've just recently had the event The Money Heist, and really all it came down to was just blanket advertising in the game. It's actually the first time I've ever seen this kind of advertisement deal between two companies in a video game. So Ubisoft have made it pretty clear that a core pillar of year 4 was to find new ways to monetize Rainbow Six Siege, and deals like Netflix and The Money Heist are just one example of that. Now, of course, one element that we've all experienced as players are the alpha packs, the loot box system in Rainbow Six Siege. Now, this concept is nothing new and has honestly been around for a while, but it is kind of starting to fade, and you're starting to see some companies forego the loot box system for a battle pass kind of method, and Rainbow Six Siege and Ubisoft are no different. So not only do we have the loot box system and also sponsorship deals kind of like this Netflix and Money Heist stuff, but Siege will also have a battle pass. And so when you add it all together, you've got the base game, which isn't free, although it is always on discount. There is a premium to it. You've got the alpha packs, the loot box system in the game. There's the sponsorship kind of event deals. There's the premium paid packs that come with the the normal events, and then you've got the Battle Pass, which will be introduced. So basically, Rainbow Six Siege is firing off on all cylinders. But also, next year we're getting Rainbow Six Quarantine, a Rainbow Six game based off of Siege that'll have a lot of the same characters and fundamental mechanics of the game we're enjoying today. So I think this just proves that Rainbow Six is no longer this side thing that Ubisoft just throws out there like, hey, we've got this. This is now a core pillar of their business, and I think one of their most standout franchises at the moment, which puts it in that same category of an Activision Call of Duty or a Blizzard Overwatch. It's a massive franchise, and all of these new opportunities that are building around it only solidify that further. Now, with more monetization should come a better game, right? More quality. And for the most part, I'd say Ubisoft have definitely upgraded Siege. Some parts of Africa that were lacking servers will have them opened up to them. They've added more teams and studios to beef up production of the game, and a better backend is being built and has honestly continued to be built in the background for a healthier game. There's also the fact that the Pro League prize pools have been larger than they've ever been. It would be nice to always get new content, and it would also be great to get faster action on some of the problems, but generally speaking, the game is looking up. Finally, guys, for the current state of Siege, I'll say that it's moving on from becoming just a game to a full-blown franchise whose name springs other games and also stands strong as a big player for Ubisoft. I've honestly looked at year 4 as one long 4-season period of an Operation Health. They took this year as an opportunity to rework 3 maps, rework multiple operators like Jackal and Glaz, and change the rules on so many baked-in policies like which operators have access to ACOGs. Siege will never be bug-free or even a complete game, right? Because the scope is just so wide. But this has definitely been a year of learning and change for sure, and the future looks, well, interesting. In year 5, I'd like to see something big. At this point, Siege knows exactly what it is, and I don't think it needs to prove anything to anyone. If you play this game, you know what you're getting into, and if you don't, you've got a friend who does, because as it stands, the game surpassed 50 million players this year. Now, as far as the current state, well, I think the more interesting question is what's next? What do the next 50 operators look like? Will year 5 and 6 and 7 see more reworks than new content? And will the game stay as healthy and as popular as it is today? If you're someone new looking to get into Rainbow Six Siege, I think now is the time. I think it's still worth it to invest your time with the game because the experience is more consistent than it's ever been, and there's still over 5 years of content left to explore. But that's everything, guys. That's the current state of Rainbow Six Siege. Now, I want to hear from you. How do you feel about the state of Siege, and what are you looking forward to in the future? Leave everything in a comment down below. If you did enjoy this video, please drop a like and subscribe with notifications if you're new. With that being said, it's been Zen. Thanks for watching. I'm out.